Now on to the division. Basically, this is exactly the same thing as multiplication. To divide rational expressions, to divide any fraction, basically all you're going to do is still multiply, just like we did, but you've got to multiply by what we call reciprocal. Okay, now the reciprocal just means you flip the numerator to the denominator and the denominator to the numerator. So look at example 4 here. To make the reciprocal, I'm just going to switch that 35p squared q squared to the bottom and the 8q to the 5th to the top, and turn this to a multiplication problem. Always do the one that's after the divide symbol. Okay, so leave this first one right how it was. This 5pq stays there, 16p to the 3rd stays there, but this one is the one we're going to flip. So we're going to put the 8q to the 5th up here, and then the 35p squared q squared down here in the bottom. Okay, that's all it is. And then it's just a multiplication problem. Now, this was like our first example. They're all monomials. We can't factor. So you simply multiply them together and then simplify. Okay, I am actually going to simplify this one a little bit first because I don't have a calculator right here while I'm doing this. I'm going to say, notice right here, I'm going to say that 8 divides into 8 one time, and 8 divides into 16 two times. I can do the same thing with 5. 5 divides into 5 once, and 5 divides into 7, or 35 7 times. So I'm going to simplify those just because I don't have a calculator. But if you have a calculator, go ahead and just multiply them together and then simplify at the end. It's probably easier to do it that way. Okay, so now when I go through, I multiply my numbers. 1 times 1 is 1. Now remember, we're adding powers with our p's, but that's our only p, so we just have the 1p. Q times q to the 5th. This is q to the 1st power. So when I add my powers, I have q to the 6th power. That is divided by 2 times 7, which is 14. P to the 3rd times p squared is p to the 5th, and then q to the 2nd power. Okay, clean it up one more time. Notice you don't want p's and q's in the top and the bottom. You only want them one place. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. The one that I don't even need to write that. When I look at so I'll just put a 14 down here. When I look at my p's, we're subtracting. There's just 1 up there. So 5 subtract 1 is 4. Notice there were more down here in the bottom. So we're going to put that p to the 4th in the bottom. Again, when you're dividing, you subtract. 6 subtract 2 is 4. But since the most are up here in the top, that q to the 4th is going to go in the numerator. That's a q, not an 8. Let me see if I can write that better. Q to the 4th. Okay. All right, let's look at the next example. Again, it's the same as multiplication. Just turn that to a multiplication and flip those. So I still have the same first fraction. It's 10 over 4x minus 8. But then I'm going to multiply it by x squared plus x minus 6. This bottom goes to the top. And then the 2x squared plus 6x goes to the bottom. All right, now we've got some binomials, a monomial, but some binomials, trinomials thrown in there, so we get to factor. Okay, that's just a monomial. I cannot factor that. I'm going to come over here and look at this. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to a -6, but add to a +1. So I know if I multiply 3 and 2, I get 6. I want my 2 to be negative, however, so when I add the 3 to -2, I get that +1. This one is just a greatest common factor. I can factor out a 2x, and I'm left with x plus 3 right there. And then over here, I can also factor out a greatest common factor of 4, and I'm left with x minus 2 right there. Okay, we could go ahead and put them all together. That might be easiest. So here I've got 10 times x plus 3 times x minus 2. That's what is left in the top. On the bottom right here, I'm going to go ahead and multiply my monomials together here. So I got 4 times 2x, or 8x, times x minus 2 times x plus 3. All right, I, again, get rid of my binomials first. I see an x plus 3 in the top and the bottom, x minus 2 in the top and the bottom. Those divide off. And then I look at my numbers. Notice right here, they're both divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide them by 2. And I've got a 5 and a 4. There's only x's on the bottom. That's fine. I'm just going to leave it there. So my final answer, only thing left on the top is that 5. In the bottom, I've got 4 times that x right there. And we're done. Not too bad, right? Again, these dividing ones are just multiplication. It's just every time you see a divide, you want to flip the fraction. Now, this is kind of a funny one because it doesn't look like a fraction. Remember, though, you can make anything a fraction if you just divide it by 1. All right, so when I see this, I'm actually going to basically make this a multiplication and then flip this fraction. This is just a multiplication, so it gets to stay there. But I just have, let's write it over here. I still have this first one. This is just like it. So it's k plus 3 over k. Again, we switch that to multiplication, put the 1 on the top this time, and then the 4k plus 1 on the bottom. And then we're going to multiply it by the 16k squared minus 1 over k plus 3. I know this looks yucky, but there's really not a lot of factoring we need to do here. What I would do is I would just make sure that you know that that's a binomial. We're multiplying those two terms together. So if they don't write it, you might want to write it in because we're going to smash them all together here in a minute. But you cannot factor this. This is just a monomial. You cannot factor this. You cannot factor this one. However, this one is factorable. Notice I have a difference of squares. 16 is a square. K squared is a square. 1 is a square. So we're going to factor this into our conjugates. We've got a plus and a minus. And you just take the square root of the first. So that goes to a 4k. Put that in the first place right there. And then the square root of the last, that just goes down there. All right, so now when we go to multiply them together, let's make one big fraction. We're just going to put everything in the top together. So we've got this k plus 3 times 1, you don't need to write that, times 4k minus 1 times 4k plus 1. That's all in the top. And then in the bottom here, we have this k and a 4k plus 1 and a k plus 3. All right, let's see what cancels here. We've got a k plus 3 in the top, divides with the k plus 3 to make 1. 4k, oh, I crossed out the wrong one. Let's see if I can just erase that. 4k, that was a minus 1. We don't want to cross out the minus 1. The one in the bottom is a plus 1. So 4k plus 1 cancels out. So I am left with just the 4k subtract 1, all divided by k right here. And that's your final answer. All right, that's all of our multiplication and division.